Hello, beautiful sunshines. Welcome to Now That's Love.
With your favorite mother-daughter duo, Ashlyn and
Janae where you get to know thyself, love thyself, and become the best version of self.
Because the greatest love story that you are ever going to tell is the one you create with yourself every day. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
So today we are going to be talking about shadow work and what is it and how can we go and talk to it and figure it out and work with it and not have it as our enemy. So, first of all, what is it? It is our unconscious or disowned part of your personality. Think of your actual shadow that your body cast out on the side of the street while you're walking down. And so, you don't really pay attention to it, but it is a part of you and it's a part of your daily life. So it starts out in childhood as a byproduct of your interactions with family, even sometimes friends, and what the belief that is put upon us that reflects into our lives now.
Yeah. And how do we identify the shadow? Number one would be projections. So noticing how we project out onto other people where, maybe if we're really judging something or critical of something and we say all this stuff about our parents or maybe a person that we meet, we're projecting out onto them. Just be witness to what you're saying about other people and how you're judging and being critical of other people, because that's part of the shadow that's within you that is unconsciously not been seen yet. And number two would be triggers. So we've talked about this so much in the last spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
That the triggers that we have where we get really tenderhearted about something, it's a beautiful place to go and be curious about, why is this bothering me so much? And I've had many beautiful epiphany moments where I'm like, oh wow, this goes back to where I was sitting. I can literally picture it right now. I was sitting at the lunchroom tables in high school, and I remember the girls and being ignored. Went and sat down, had my lunch. I'm in the popular group, and one girl says, let's not talk to Janae today, as I sit down. And here I am, and I didn't have a voice to say, are you serious?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I sat there and ate my lunch, completely feeling less than. That was something I needed to go face, bring to the light. Shadow work is, I want to state this right now, is like the fragments that we need to bring together into the light and bring them into us, internalize, and just love on it and comfort it. Because the whole reason that a shadow has even been developed is from childhood, that say you were sensitive and you cried a lot, and a parent said, you need to stop crying. I'm so tired of you crying. You're such a wimpy, boy, or you're a wuss, whatever it was said. Then you started to deny your emotions. And later on, we will judge ourselves. And so what the shadow needs is actually the opposite. It needs, okay, I see this. It needs compassion and no judgment. Otherwise, it's getting deeper and thicker. And it's like you're walking down the street and, man, your shadow is like a big old black shadow. It can feel like that's scary. It's more dense. And shadow work isn't supposed to be like a scary ghost.
Oh yeah, people think it's like, ooh, it's coming to get me.
And we kind of did ourselves, like shadow work. It just sounds scary, right? Yeah. Like you honestly think about it. A little kid is scared of the shadows when you go night night. It might be a monster in the wall. Like that's because our minds are just so imaginative. It really isn't just a shadow from the lamp that you have in your room, the little kid has in the room, all of a sudden, it might be a monster's head coming out of the wall.
The pile of laundry in your room
Yeah.
casts a shadow that looks like a man coming to get
so
you.
take away the energy of the shadow work. It actually needs more love. You now as an adult get to take what you needed as a little kid, and you get to be the one that says, hey, I see it, and you love on it. So that's what the triggers. Number 3 is patterns. So think of, this is why journaling is so amazing, but patterns in our life where we can see them in relationships. Oh my goodness, for me, this was where I had to take serious responsibility for my life. And look at the money patterns, look at your relationships with others patterns, especially in intimate relationships. Look at the patterns of how you treat yourself as a little sabotaging. Those are just all it is. All it is saying, hey, there's some shadow work here. You are fragmented and it's dark and you need to put some light on it. And then
it can be a blockage in your life.
Yes, a full
It may be a blockage in your relationships where you can't reach a certain place in relationships. Like you said, you self-sabotage to the point where you reach a certain point and it might be an amazing relationship, but then you start backing out. You start becoming avoidant. Or with money, you might not feel like you deserve this money because you haven't worked on those certain shadows in your life where maybe you grew up with not a lot of money. And so you have that in the back mindset, or you've always had a parent that has told you, well, we don't have money for that. So you have to go back and work on that shadow, or in your brain, you are never going to have enough money. You are never going to be good enough for that relationship with others and within yourself.
Yeah. And you wonder why you sabotage relationships. You start assuming everything or taking things personally, or you can't let somebody in. And once you do the shadow work, it's this opening up of your higher self, just your best self, but it will keep you stagnant at a baseline unless you do this shadow work. It's imperative to do it. And it's so amazing. It's like so worth it. So, and the last one, number 4, would be introspection. The observation work. So questions to ask yourself. I want you to ask these 3 questions that are so aha moments. Okay.
Yes.
This is tips to do shadow work. Journaling exercise. Number 1, was I completely accepted as a child? Write that down. Was I completely accepted as a child? Number 2, what was expected of me? When you were younger, what was expected of me? Did you have to go to a church? Did you have to get straight A's? You had to take violin? What were the things that were contrasting against what you really truly didn't feel like you wanted to do? Did you have to be quiet at the kitchen table? Did you don't speak when you eat until... I knew a family that none of the kids around the table could drink a glass of water, any liquid, until all their meal was completely done off their plate, because the mom believed it would ruin their digestion. That was just that family. Wow. But I can remember like the control factor of that. Number 3, what behaviors and emotions were judged by my parents? What behaviors and emotions were judged by my parents, or those that raised you, your caregivers?
Grandparents, aunts, uncles, foster parents.
And just write these down. And you can pause this video at this time if you want to take, or you can just write them down and do it after the video is done. So that's something to ask yourself. So there's some questions to ask yourself that Ashlyn's going to name out.
Yes. So another journaling exercise for your shadow. I thought these were just really magical whenever my mom mentioned these. And the first one is, what parts of myself do I dislike? Whether it's some things that we've even talked about in the past with our body image, with our just crazy anxiety mind. Can't stop your racing thoughts. Number 2, what parts of myself do I judge? And if you're like, oh, I don't judge any part of myself, what are you judging others? Because if you're judging others about it, you're judging yourself.
Yeah, if you're judging others for being so critical, then you probably need the introspection of like maybe you're subconscious mind is actually, when it's going on its own, is pretty critical of you.
Because I used to think, oh, I'm not judgmental. And then there'd be moments where I would look at somebody walking down the street and judge them on something. And like now I shut that. Yeah. It's like, wow. Number 3, what parts of myself do I fear?
Do you fear like having rage? Like, do you fear that if you were to just literally feel your anger in front of somebody and just, you would lose control, absolutely lose control? Like you might just lose it and like then totally regret it. Like, or you might fear just slipping all this stuff out of your mouth.
Well, I think for me, something that I feared while I was doing this was getting close to somebody and getting hurt.
Yeah.
Whether it comes to friendships, or just relationships in my life. Because I felt like growing up, there were certain moments where I would get really close to somebody, or I was part of a group, and then something would happen where they would either leave, move out of town, or I would be kind of kicked out of the group. So I didn't want that attachment anymore.
Yeah.
And then once you've journaled all 3 of those, this shows you the aspects of your shadow self. It's honestly like journaling these down will even help you reflect later on. So don't think you just need to do these exercises once. Maybe a new fear will come up in a couple months after you've worked on this part of your shadow. It's not just like work on your whole shadow. Right. You're going to find little triggers. You're going to find little moments. Like whenever I was doing shadow work, there was certain moments where I would find like codependency. And then I worked through that in my relationships. But then there would also be moments where I would find myself maybe being a little bit of a perfectionist. And so you'll find little things that come from your childhood that don't develop, but don't just dive into it and just think, this is it. That's all I need to do. Because there'll be moments where things will come back up, and don't be hard on yourself about that.
Yeah. And knowing that the shadow is, there's positive and negatives. And so if I weren't afraid, what would I do with my life? Your shadow is like with a fear zone of just stopping yourself from really seeing your truest gifts. Oh my goodness, all of us are given them. And I'm still walking this, of going in to, there's actually on YouTube shamanic meditations to do the journey of your shadow work into your gifts and what your purpose is. And they take you out of a fear place. It's very beautiful into theta. And then you get to see like your higher self of what your purpose of, what's your dharma, your specific gifts that you've been given. And it kind of gives you that little extra doing the shadow work. Mm-hmm. This is the truest thing of what I want to be there. So doing this work, which is so imperative, or you kind of live this basic life. We don't want to judge ourselves. We want to have compassion. It's part of our evolution. And I feel personally that is our purpose, is to find what was specially given to us to share with the world. And
well, I even feel like your mindful meditations are great for that as well.
Thank you.
That you've been posting on YouTube. Those are great.
I've been taking you all into some deep breath work, taking you down into the theta, and you get to be there visiting, like right there in touch with your heart space, with your higher self. And so that can help you also with your shadow work. I'm doing one on triggers, and I did one just barely on problem solving. And one thing I want to say on that, because I just posted that up, that meditation on problem solving, and I thought, oh, I wish I could have added this to it, is that our brain is actually already wired to go from one problem to the next problem, because that's how we were raised. Like the math problems, the science problems, there's always a problem. But when we're little tiny kids, Malay at 4 years old is not thinking I have a problem.
No.
So it's
he slept in an extra hour today.
Yeah, it's integrated and wired. And so it helps you with the meditation. Definitely is so helpful with the problems, but we don't want to have our life be from one problem to the next, because it will always appear. we'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, I just solved this relationship or took care of this. Now I'm going to go take care of this person thing, you
Yeah.
know? So that
Which
kind of
we'll
takes the
totally
joy out of
do. I
life.
want to do a whole other podcast just about the addiction to healing, because I think
Yes.
when you start getting into the spiritual realm, you just want to dive into all these self-help books and journaling and meditations, and it's all wonderful. But then you can become slightly addicted to
Your whole
what's the next
day's
thing that
about
I
it.
can feed my soul. It's kind of like
Yeah.
itching for it.
It's the next tap out because your whole day is consumed by it. And I literally experienced this where I had an epiphany moment one day where I was like, am I really living? Or is it all this work? Because at the beginning, I needed it. It is
Yeah.
kind of the survival of my mind and my body. But one thing about shadow work that kind of was a aha for Ashlyn and I is that if you look at the box, we do the mind, body, and spirit. But if you put the body up here and down here, you think of your shadow,
If
it's a
you're
box.
listening to this, she's showing also kind of a diamond shape in
Yeah,
a
there's a
way.
diamond shape of the mind, body, and spirit. And then you take it to a square because we don't want to leave the shadow out. We actually want to, here's the body and here's the shadow. You know, we're walking down the street, anywhere, wherever we are, there's always our shadow.
Mhm.
So let's remember the shadow and integrate it and have it be just compassionately loved and guided and not judged. And that's the light it's needing. That's the
Mhm.
light it's asking for because it all was created from judgment and, you know, not having the compassion. So remember that. That's what now as an adult, we get to go in and say, hey, and even if you're like feeling like a little kid now, being in your room with all the shadows, now you have a
Mhm.
flashlight. You're bringing the light into the
Mhm.
shadow. Oh, big scary monster. You
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it
you're
for
no longer
things for
it's no
what they
longer
really
taking
are.
over your life, and you're able to fully be in the present moment once you work on that. Because
Yeah.
there's certain times where your shadow can kind of take you either back into the past and keep on taking you there, but when you start working on it, I found myself becoming freer and freer in the moment
Oh,
every day.
yes. Isn't it? It's, and I'm just like a love bug to my shadow. I'm like, come here, come
Well,
here. I
that's what I
see
love.
you.
I think the first thing you need to do also is think of something that you want to work on. So, like,
Yeah.
what is holding you back?
Yeah.
And I also want to
Fear.
mention that if you don't work on it, I know this is like the highest of extremes, but I know many people that have lost their lives because they were so stuck in their old self, their old mindset, that they didn't know how to escape it. They weren't able to get out of the craziness that was around them.
Yeah.
So they ended up committing suicide because they couldn't be in their body anymore because they felt trapped. This is why this work is so important.
Yeah.
And you need to figure out what's holding you back because it's going to go through, like you said, all aspects of your life, your mind, your body, your
Right.
spirit. And if you don't work on that, you're going to see depression, anxiety, all these like health effects that are just leaching inside your body. So, number two, you also need to think of the version of you and invite that in. So, your old self, like, welcome it. Like my mom said, like, it's something not to be scared of. It's not
No,
going to hurt
needs
you.
love. That little kid wanted to say, "Hey, come here. You're crying. Talk to me." Or if you were a 3 and you couldn't exactly explain it, but you just got this love and sat on the lap or just snuggle on everything. You just needed that little snuggle. Or you're 7 or 14. You just needed to feel heard. And maybe you were making these decisions that you were out being rowdy and everything, but the parents saying, "Listen, like." You're going to suffer the consequences of these things, but let's talk it out, whatever it is, instead of just that's it,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what's so neat about this. In all honesty, just is you get to grow and expand, but you're the caregiver, you're the love bug, you're the
Mm-hmm.
person that gets to bring all that light in and just love on your shadow. This is just integrating and not denying yourself because otherwise it's so fragmented out. I can't express that enough. Like now you feel like you're all over the place and that you can't
Mm-hmm.
make enough money and you can't be okay in relationships and you're binge eating and
You start feeling
you know
helpless for
you
sure.
feel like you are like in this cesspool of fear, like
Mm-hmm.
fear of this and fear of that. And it's just take a breath and take one thing at a time, like Ashlyn said, just one thing at a time. What am I fearing right now? The questions we asked are so instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit with it and love yourself. Love yourself
And
through
then not
this,
even
all of
just
you.
like sit with it and, love it, but also talk to it. Like
Right.
why are you doing these things?
Well,
What is this keeping you from?
right.
We talked about this yesterday, and it was like, become your own therapist. Sit down in the therapist chair, welcome it in, talk to it, say, come on. Or,
That,
I know a lot of men out there that are listening to us, think of it like the Godfather. Like, what have you come to do to me today?
love
Like
that.
the recognition of your, like, that former version of yourself. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay to just
Don't,
welcome
you're
it
the
in, talk to it.
observer. Yeah, you're the observer. So just like Ashley said, have your whole visual scenario of like your amazing therapist room, and you're the therapist,
Maybe
the
you have a
observer.
fireplace in there. Sometimes I like to imagine my own
And
therapy
oh, me
room.
too. Like, what color is it?
I'm in
And
a
you
log
invite the dark shadow.
cabin.
Yeah. Invite the dark shadow into your beautiful. I have the color Ashlyn's wearing right now. That's my chair. You're coming
Mhm.
in. And a bright white room. So it would be your dark shadow.
It
You're
makes it
inviting it in.
fun because it's like
Yeah.
your little girl walking in. Come on,
It's
sweetheart,
not
come
a
sit down.
spooky go.
Let's.
Yeah, it's not a spooky ghost, like, or like you think of
It's not
vampires coming
Casper,
to get you.
everybody.
Yeah.
It's not Casper the friendly ghost, because I think that's what I imagined, like, whenever I first was doing dark shadow work. I was picturing, like, Casper coming in, but no, it's just the past version
It's
of you that just
us.
needs extra
Yeah.
love. It just needs to be
It's,
talked to. It needs a little
yeah.
help.
And it just wants love, and just say, listen, you don't need to be scared. As a little kid, a little girl, yeah, I can see, or boy, I can see how you were scared, or I can
Yeah,
see how you didn't
acknowledge
feel
it.
loved in that moment. Yeah, just acknowledge, and then you can reframe it. So take it, the story, and as your old version of who you are, you're an adult. How would you have reacted now? Say your mom did slap your face. She was very critical of you. I'm just having some story come into my mind. And so now you're going as an adult. You're going to that shadow, the little girl. You're going into that. Now, as an adult, what are you going to say to your mama?
Hmm.
How are you going to do that? Let it reframe in your mind, and then see the perspectives and stuff. And
Or even
so
with just
you're there to take care of yourself.
a harsh dad or something that laid his hands on you, or you just never felt good enough in your family dynamic. Maybe you were like the black sheep in the family, that you just always felt off. You could never feel like you could be authentically yourself. And now you're talking to that little giddy little girl that wanted to laugh at the dinner table or wanted to run around, but don't place judgment on her or him, and just
No.
truly sit down and listen to them. Don't be like, "Oh, I'm going to push that away. I don't want to face that." Because the second you do that, you're just your shadow's going to start being like, "You know what? You're not ready
Yeah.
for me quite yet."
If you're judging yourself on any level, you are not, you're creating a deeper shadow. So when you have a trigger, which it was so common for so many people, is that when you have a trigger, all of a sudden you're judging yourself for having the trigger, or you're judging the other person. But if you're judging yourself of like, oh, once again, I found myself doing this. Oh, you're adding to your shadow. We're adding to our shadow. And so, no, what you need to come in is with the compassion and the understanding,
Mm,
and talk to yourself. Be
yeah.
the nurturer in that moment. That's what brings the light in, and
Yeah,
like
you're able to
makes the
integrate
shadow
that
go.
every
Yeah,
day into your life, and it's giving yourself that validation. And I think I really needed that. That was a
yeah,
main step for me that I really needed, of like, you were okay to feel how you felt in that moment. Give yourself that support that you needed, and not have any more guilt about the situation. Because whenever we were going through this, even just yesterday, I was telling my mom that I suffered through really high guilt whenever my friend passed away, because I didn't, in my head, I wasn't that mom that I always wanted to be. So I had that guilt of like, oh my gosh, Malay got like this really shitty mom. And I was terrible. Just like those thoughts that just really dive deep into like where you feel like you're at, and just go into it. And that's how I felt at certain moments. And then I was able to support it. You know what, sweetheart? You did the best you could in that time. I gave myself validation of, no, like, he was so loved on. Like, he was fed, he was taken care of. You did your best in that moment. So don't have any more guilt about the situation that you were in. It a lot of times, like you mentioned, it's your dharma. Your what you go through is going to end up leading you to where you need to be. I know sometimes in the moment you're like, this is fucking bullshit. But validate yourself. If you need to like punch a pillow during your dark shadow work, do that. Scream in your car. I know I've mentioned this in a couple times on a previous podcast, but those things really help you, and you're giving yourself what you needed during that time. And during that time, and just even little parts of my life, I needed a protection. I needed support. I needed a hug. Just being like, what you're going through right now is freaking sucky. And own that. Be in that moment. Cry. Like we've, as you can see, we've cried a lot. And because we're releasing, we're letting go, we're welcoming in the dark shadow and talking to it, acknowledging it, validating it. And honestly, I now kind of get excited to meet my Casper. You know, I get excited to meet my dark shadow, and because you won't become the highest standards, you become the lowest of where you're at. So don't just stay at that base center. Don't you want to elevate? You don't want to stay at that base.
No,
so get there, yeah.
You don't feel like you are really truly living if you're not tapping out all the time. There's something inside you that's internally saying you're meant to be always in progression.
Stay at the baseline. You don't want to stay at the baseline. Like, it's like staying at the bottom of the mountain. Don't you want to keep elevating whenever you get to the top of the mountain? And sometimes there's going to be many mountains that you're going to go over. But once you get to the top of the mountain, isn't that view so beautiful? You're like, oh my God, I've reached here. I finally have conquered this. And that's how I felt about codependency. And just even like things that I've done in my life, when I'm creating my own website and us doing this podcast. Like, I feel like at those certain points, like, oh my God, I've reached like this top of my dharma,
something about
my mountain.
and creating healthy boundaries and finding our voice. Like somebody said something to me, I have no problem speaking my voice, and I do it from the best way I can. But it's empowering. So many times we didn't, but you can take that back to being a little kid. Like, don't talk back to me. Don't you say anything. Don't you speak right now. All these different things. And, you know, and it's not like you sit there in your dark shadow and be like, I am going to sit here and blame my lineage of my family. You don't do that, because they did
my great grandma. This is why.
Yeah, it's not about that. It's about you going in and loving on yourself. Like you're going in and taking care of the cute little you. And with that, you see the perspective of the other person and know that they were doing the best they could. And you can kind of even fast forward to like, yeah, well, hello, I carried some of those habits with me and I did it to my own children, or
well,
this
I think
or that.
even for me recently, I went to go visit family, and I feel like I've always kind of had like this dark shadow with money. And I didn't really understand why this dark shadow with money is. And then talking to my grandpa, he was saying that his father came from the Great Depression and he had an abusive father. And seeing how that's kind of passed down the line of like the Great Depression mindset of save your money, keep your money within you, which is great, obviously, to save your money, invest your money. But it brought down that mindset from my dad's dad to my dad to me, where I have like this mindset of do the plan of life, go to college, have a family, do this, do that. And maybe that's not your plan in life. Maybe your plan is to be a freaking entrepreneur. Maybe your plan in life is not to be a doctor, and your plan in life is to be a whole like shama therapist, whatever, like meditation dude. And I'm not saying that it has to be in the spiritual realm, but maybe you sit back and you realize you were doing something from your childhood for your parents, of what your parents' beliefs were on money, what your parents' beliefs were in relationships, religion, everything. And once you see that, you're able to be like, oh my gosh, like I remember just listening into the conversation and being an observer. I was like, oh my gosh, like mind blown. This is where my money beliefs come, that I have to store it like a chipmunk and that there's not enough to go around. And just even this, you have to be on this path to earn money and retirement and everything, be on the safe path. And even right now, I'm working through that for myself of not having to do
programmed.
that. Like, I'm proud of myself of where I've gotten with my degrees. And I love the path that I took on that. I love the teacher path. I love teaching, obviously. I love learning. But recognizing that was a huge, oh, okay, maybe I need to go back and ask those questions that we asked earlier that for our journal and exercises.
Yes. And that goes right back to our fears. Asking yourself, what would I do if fear like wasn't in the equation? If I knew it was a for sure bet, 100% that I would get to live this way or do this one thing or 5 things, what would I do as my profession? What would I do with my relationship? And that's where you get to grow. So much fun. But that, part of the dark shadow to show us. This is where
don't run away from the ghost.
Just run up the mountain, face the fear. Like I have one of my meditations is like walking or talking about fear is like visualize it that it's you see this humongous lake and you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how to swim, there's no way, I'm scared to death. You stay on the other side, but on the other side there is an amazing island that has the most amazing fruit and food, and you're like, oh, I've heard everybody talking about it, but you stay on that other side because you're so scared of water. There's no way you'd get in a boat because this might happen, and you have all these stories about this dang lake water. And then you take 1 foot in and you realize it's really not a lake. It's a mirage, and it's only 1 inch thick. And you could run all the way over to that island, and it's just the mirage.
Well, it even reminds me of the show we were watching yesterday where they were skydiving. And like you mentioned, you're like, it's just the first skydive that you have to do. And then you can do it. You're okay. You know what it feels like. So just go into it, understand what it feels like, and then you'll be able to do more and more and more with yourself. And oh my gosh, just the wonders that it will do for your relationships with yourself, but with everyone around you. I viewed everyone so differently, of not expecting perfection within people, reverse roles.
And it's a day at a time of just becoming more and more free with integrating your beautiful shadow. I think you've had like the little beautiful silhouette of your body. I have this beautiful silhouette of my shadow.
Yes.
On my body.
Is it this like clunky thing that's following around?
It's think like, about in grade school when we laid down on this, everybody did this in school at some point. We laid down on paper and we painted our body, and think of like your beautiful shadow, like you're integrating it. It's part of you. And it's just that silhouette of like carving your body. And to start doing your shadow work if you haven't started, but even just to add to the questions that you can ask yourself that really can be beneficial, join our community.
And we have so many amazing journals too that you can use on our Amazon link. Go to @Now That's Love.
Some of our little lovely books that we have on our journals, like, The Dark Shadow. We have this. You can just brain dump.
Yes, brain dump, burn book, which is also so amazing. Yeah. And I have my cute Halloween book too. So you guys can write your journal entries in that. And it's fun just in time for Halloween.
Yeah, so we have our lovely Etsy shop of all original designs by Ashlyn and I that are just about reminders of empowering, but just like loving on yourself. And it has some shadow work. I have one with,
it even has great journals there too as well.
Yes.
Journals on our Amazon and on our Etsy, which you can go to @Now That's Love to find those out.
Yeah, phone cases. I designed one that spoke to my heart with being so quiet in my voice chakra, not speaking up so many times in my life. I created a woman with a wolf coming out of her into her throat, and it's called the She Wolf. But check it out because it has a story behind it for all those that are wanting to get their voices and be heard and not caring about what other people, how they react to you speaking your truth. So it's very empowering, part of your dark
And if you
shadow.
need the link, I'm also going to add it in the comments too as well below. So you guys can check that out. So that way you're supporting our community, you're supporting yourself, and helping us create more amazing videos for y'all to listen to.
Yeah, and share this with those that you know that would really truly be able to be this beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm.
So much love from Ashlyn and I. Lots of
Now
love.
that's love, baby
Now
dolls.
that's love,
Bye
baby doll
bye.
and boys.